Well, I first things first, I watched the movie yesterday and had an absolute joy watching it. It was an absolute treat to continue hearing about your story, Walter. And I want to start here first. A lot has happened since The King of Kong. Of course, people that would be most familiar probably through that documentary. Walter, I want to start. Of course, you had this dream to get your music out there, but why did you say yes to having bringing people into your life again and telling more of your story? Why did you sign up for another movie?
Well, um, let me give you sort of like an overarching genesis of how this happened. Of course, in 1985, I had a glamorous girlfriend, and essentially one night, I was very in love with her. One night, she called me up and said, "Hey, Walter, I've been seeing a friend of yours, and we're done." So my heart was broken. First time, and actually only time I ever had my heart broken. And it was a very, very big experience. But what became interesting is that a couple of weeks into the heartbreak, I started hearing music playing in me, almost like I was channeling a radio station, but that radio station was playing songs that were new, that were my songs that didn't exist in the outside world. So I was absolutely fixated on this and blown away by this. And I started writing the songs down, and I started singing the songs into tape recorders. And I vowed, I got so enchanted by it, I vowed that someday I was going to get on the stage, I was going to produce those songs, and I was actually going to sing. Even though I had never been a singer, didn't have a good singing voice, and never ever expected to sing, but I was vowing and determined that this was going to happen. 20 years after that, Ed and Seth Gordon come along, and they're doing a video game movie. And even though video games were my thing, I was more excited about talking about my music and telling them how I want to get the video games behind me and go off and be a singer-songwriter. And that was my heart's desire, the goal of my life. They were intrigued by this. They were also somewhat impressed with some of the songs I sang for them. So they put, acoustic versions of some of my songs into the King of Kong, which is still there, of course, to hear me play. And uh, and then they went their way, and I went my way. Almost 20 years after that, I was at an event when a couple people came out of the crowd and they said, "Walter, we recognize you from the King of Kong. Whatever happened to that music? Anything ever come out of it?" And I explained to them that it was still my dream to do, but it never happened just because of all the difficulties of life. And they said, "Well, we made a game called Color Switch. It's been successful. And we've got the money, and we want to pay for your album as a gift, no strings attached, for a gift for you, and actually bring your dream to fruition." And next thing I know, I'm in a studio recording my music. At this point, Ed becomes aware that Walter Day's finally doing his music, and he thinks, "Oh my God, what an incredible story this is to tell the story of a man who never gave up his dreams, and towards the end of his years, finally, finally fulfills this lifelong dream." And that's why they did the movie, and that's why the theme, in a sense, of the movie is it's never too late.
Yeah, and that's a main takeaway. And Ed, I want to bring you in on this as well. What was it like for you to revisit Walter's story, and when you heard that Walter was finally getting this music ready to go and ready to perform? Why what inspired you to continue telling the story?
Well, I got pulled back in just before I learned about Walter's music because Walter got pulled into a lawsuit. Billy Mitchell had been in a lawsuit with Twin Galaxies, which Walter had sold after King of Kong. And I actually, because some of that lawsuit, it mentioned the film, it specifically mentioned the film. And so I got back involved to help Walter defend himself from a lawsuit from a movie that we produced, almost 20 years ago. That was really a strain on Walter's life. And I was there as a friend, and we reconnected through what was a hardship for him. And it was during one of those meetings where I was meeting, actually, I met these Color Switch guys, and they said, "Hey, we're paying for his album. He's in the studio." And it only took me about 24 hours before I realized, Walter mentioned the scene in King of Kong where he's talking about his music and he's playing his song. And it's a great scene in front of this barn in Iowa in the winter. And I just thought, this brings it full circle. And it's also a different story. We had no interest in doing King of Kong 2. There's a whole mini series about what came out of that movie, good, bad, and otherwise. We didn't have interest in that. And I was looking for something creative to do. I wanted to direct something. I knew this material. I think the biggest challenge for me was probably in post production, how much, because I loved so much of it.
Hmm.
How do you cut it down to its narrative? But the story was really written for us. Walter was already producing his music. He already had a date set for performing his music. And so that's sort of the perfect setup for a documentary is you already have these mileposts that you can film in real time and then do the backfill. So Walter said this early on when we started filming. He's like, the story's almost already written. And I think our cameras being there upped Walter's game. It made it a little more important. And, I'm very happy with what turned out to be really, it's a singer-songwriter heartbreak movie about this guy with an interesting background in video games. And that's the way we always looked at it.
Yeah, there's so much. I mean, I think that's as a fan of the original, that's kind of when I heard I was like, Walter Day, all the King of Kong gang is back. Is this King of Kong too? But you get the elements that to keep the story from what's happened with King of Kong, but it is your story, Walter, and throughout everything that you've been dealing with, music has always been a part of your life. But tell me, just not maybe not even just the role that your music, but just music in general played in your life as you went through the post King of Kong era, which had a lot of highs and some of the lowest lows.
Well, it was very interesting because, as I said, the songs that were coming to me were so original and, from my perspective, very enrapturing and very beautiful and very and almost intoxicating. And so, I was so completely committed to do it that as the years began to come on, and right before the King of the Color Switch guys came out, I actually began to have tremendous fears and would even have nightmares about how, oh, that's the end of my life, and I never, ever, ever did the music and never shared it to the world, so the world would find out how beautiful it is. And I even got interviewed a couple times telling people, telling the writers that this is my biggest nightmare, that I'm getting towards the end of my years. I'm 76 now, and I'll never have produced this music that I carried with me for 40 whole years. Hearing these songs play, like I'm listening to a radio station play inside me, year after year after year after year. So it became a worry. And I'd even have nightmares sometimes, dreaming that I walked by an open door of a store and I'd hear a radio in there playing some of my songs, and I'd be completely crushed, thinking, "Oh no, someone else beat me to that song." And so it was quite an interesting psychological, emotional, landscape that I passed through in the process of reaching this point where we're sitting here right now.
It had to feel pretty amazing. Just tell me a little bit about the first time you heard the studio version of your album. I actually listened to most of it after watching the movie yesterday, and I remember that scene in King of Kong. Out in front of the barn singing Three Lies there with your acoustic guitar. What was it like for you, Walter, to hear the studio versions of your song? Because there's a lot of oomph behind all of this, and I think your voice kind of shines through in a way that folks might be a little surprised.
Well, here's the thing about the voice. The voice is still a work in progress. When I got up on the stage, I got, I got up there with more courage than I got up with skill in singing, because I'm brand new. Because I never was a singer, never expected to be a singer, never thought of being a singer, never imagined being a singer, and I never sung. When I got up there on the stage, I was singing for the first time in my life in front of people, and um, and that was a huge psychological, emotional adventure, and involved a lot of trust. And but I was so zoned into it that I look back now and I reflect. When I reflect on it, I think, I can't believe that I didn't have a lot of doubt at the moment that I got up on the stage. That even though I was nervous for a moment, as I stated there in the film, I actually didn't doubt for a moment that I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what I was supposed to be doing.
And I love all that. And Ed, can you kind of give me some insights? Seeing Walter on the stage and going through this process, what was it like for you? You're used the first time you guys interacted, you're used to Walter in the referee shirt and doing, being the father of esports, which I do have to ask about in a little bit, but our focus is on the music for now. What was it like for you to be able to see this side of the story and kind of continue it for continue your journey and your relationship with Walter and everyone in the movie?
It really, for Walter and I, this project really became a hip to hip project. I wasn't necessarily following him as we were sort of going along and making sure Walter's been in a lot of movies. So he knew when to call and ask, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think?" And, we just sort of thought this out together. what really I don't think either of us thought out was there was going to be a moment where Walter walked up on a stage, which, I'd always hoped to be the end of the film, which it is. Um, and he was going to sing these songs. I'd heard Walter, the first time I heard Walter was winter of 2005. That's when we shot that footage in front of that barn. So I've heard, 8 or 10 of his songs acoustically. I've always liked his voice. It's got sort of a folksy, soulful thing to it. His songs are really great. They stick with you. They're total earworms. The production value on this album is incredible. There's really good musicians. The first time I heard it, I was like, wow, that guitar player can play and not overplay. And, I just think they did a nice job in the studio. But, and we tried to convey this in the film, on the way to performing, Walter was taking voice lessons. We have some of that in there. He was really practicing at home with his lyrics so he could be off book and, in the moment with his lyrics, because he was sort of just writing those right up till the end. And I kept asking him, I kept saying, Walter, do you want to go do like an open mic and maybe just take your guitar, play the 3 songs? Nah, I want it to be the first time when I walk up there. And now there's 90 people. The place was sold out, standing room only. It's not a big venue. And you're so focused on following the story. I had a camera, we had a camera in the car, so I'm making sure they're cutting stuff. I'm in the room with like 5 cameras, and here comes Walter. When he walked up, he completely froze. And we have that moment in the film. I've seen Walter personally on stage and in footage on stage hundreds of times. I've never seen him freeze. And frankly, the first song, which was Three Lies, wasn't his greatest performance. He was sort of stumbling around. He didn't quite have the volume of the room down. And I panicked. I literally thought, we made a film about a high school football team and we called it Undefeated, but the team lost their first game of the season and then went undefeated the rest of the way. This one was going to be, how do I start a movie with a guy having a terrible, because I wanted this to be the end. And the beauty of what happened was this culture, two communities that Walter has really worked on in his life are the video game world and also his hometown where he lives in Fairfield. And those people showed up for him during that show. Billy Mitchell's there, Steve Sanders from King of Kong are there. The guys from Color Switch flew in from California. So he had all his video game people there to support him and all the locals that he's friends with and sort of, oh, Walter's doing music. There was this little buzz in the town. Their energy and Walter engaging with them and talking to them a little bit, his performance just went like this. It was so cool to watch. But I do have a minute, about 5 minutes of my life where I thought, oh my, because we had filmed almost everything we needed up to that point. We only had to do one more like 5-day shoot of pickups during post-production. We were done. And he came out and froze. And so it was only in that moment it became real that, oh, we sort of everything was written except for this moment. And Walter is a very savvy performer. He's had a mic in his hand a lot. He's very glib, has fun with the audience. And once he brought them in and they gave him the support, and I think that's really what's beautiful about the movie. Walter has a nice performance that night. He's not Celine Dion, but he had a really nice performance. But it wasn't about that. It was about him taking this huge risk in front of these people and them turning around because he's done this for everyone his whole life, supporting him in a way that made it turn out really just a beautiful night.
And Walter, I think that's one of the biggest things of this movie. We saw it in the King of Kong, and we know how much you have given to the video game world, to people in your life. How did it feel to see that room full and to have that interaction with the crowd and to be able to joke and to have so many important people in your life, both from video games and your hometown where you've stayed loyal forever. You've committed a lot to where you're from. Just tell me, just give me a little bit of insight into that and into the people that showed up for you on that night.
Well, I did freeze for a few moments there, but I got uplifted. I got uplifted by everybody's energy, the dynamics of all these people there being completely in support, because it was quite a sensation. Walter Day appearing on a poster, he's going to sing and play music, because I was on no one's radar as a musician. I was on no one's radar as a singer. I had never done an open mic. I'd never participated in a band or anything like that. I had played piano, ragtime piano, 40 years earlier, but that was completely an ancient memory, and I didn't even know how to play those songs anymore. But as a singer, this was brand new, and I was just breaking everybody's brain on what is this? So people had to come, not only to support me, but out of extreme curiosity, like, what could this possibly mean? And the movie, many people speak that out. That wow, this is interesting. We got to see what this is all about. So for me, I was uplifted by the group consciousness of the people who were there to support me, and especially the love of all the video game players who came at great expense from very very far away to actually launch my ship of being a singer songwriter.
What's your message to people that are in your boat? And let's throw age out of the question. I think that's one of the best parts of this movie is that it says, who cares? If you have a goal, if you have a dream, let's use your resources and get you there. What type of advice do you have for maybe people that are going through? They have these big picture ideas. They have stuff on their mind that life's got in the way, this, that, and the other things got in the way. What type of advice do you have for them, Walter?
Well, one thing I haven't mentioned yet is in the community of Fairfield, out of the 10,000 people that are there, approximately 4,000 of them practice transcendental meditation. And I mean, it's pretty well established that when you do TM as a part of your daily routine, that you just stay, your energy level's higher, your creativity and clarity is higher, and also the physiology can stay younger longer. And so the youthfulness that I definitely brought to the table in doing this whole thing and going through this whole thing definitely came from doing TM. But essentially, people, it doesn't have to be the end of their life when I'm 76, and me and Ed are talking about what my plans are now for actually having a singer songwriter career and doing even my next album. So the sky's the limit, and I'm very pleased that it's turned out in such a way. And I'm also amazed by the writing of the movie that Ed and his team of writers put into making the film what it is, because it almost hangs by, it's almost delicate the way it hangs by to make all the parts work for it to be such a nice, warm-hearted, finer feeling, heartfelt kind of film. Because as I've said in other interviews, this is not an action film at all. This completely is devoted to impulses of the heart, in a sense. Not one single time does Godzilla make an appearance or an alien burst from my chest. It's completely all about, you know, how the way people work together and how their hearts fit together, which is becoming an important theme at this time in history because the world is so crazy.
Indeed, it is a very crazy, a crazy spot. And Ed, I kind of want to build on that for you. Was it? I don't know if responsibility is the right word, where it was just a bunch of people stepping up to help Walter. Did you? I know you joined in, and when you heard you had the opportunity to help, but did you feel a responsibility to kind of step up and help Walter and kind of, you mentioned going to bat for him with the legal stuff and not only telling this story. There's a lot of people that come up and say, this is a person that has given a lot, basically his entire life to others. It's time for us to do something for him. Did you feel like a responsibility or something similar to that?
100%. Yes. That's interesting as I've gone along in my career as a filmmaker. And you often see this when you apply for film festivals as a questionnaire of your support system for the people you're sharing their story. Because there's this disconnect where I'm a filmmaker, they said, yes, I can make this thing. Poof, it goes out in the world. Hailstorms, no matter what, I'm not involved. But the truth is, you're responsible for putting it out in the world. And yes, you can't control how people respond. I couldn't control that Walter ended up in a lawsuit, but my responsibility as the person who helped make King of Kong and bring Walter into public scrutiny enough that he could be pulled into a lawsuit like that. It is, I think, as a documentary filmmaker, my responsibility to then be a part of the solution that we helped create. And so that was, and I don't know, Paul, that I would have felt that way 10 or 15 years ago. You know, now that I'm a parent, now that I've made enough films to have people's lives really changed because of them in several cases, lives have really changed, and not all of them for the better. You have to really own that. And then when the lawsuit hit, and it was specifically around some of the things that are in our film is mentioned multiple times in the lawsuit that was filed. I felt the responsibility. And then the double responsibility was everyone who saw King of Kong, or anyone we've talked about, everyone talks about Walter and their love for him. They have their feelings about Steve Wiebe, they have their feelings about Billy Mitchell, totally different camps. It's like Raiders versus Seahawks kind of thing.
Hmm.
And yet Walter sits right in the middle as Pete Carroll. Uh, yeah, I just give you a compliment, Walter. Um, but everyone loved
I like
Walter. And because we had, and this is personal for me, the scene in King of Kong where Walter shares his music and plays at that barn, I had just gotten good enough as an editor to present scenes. Seth Gordon was the director and the lead editor, where I could sort of lay scenes into the timeline, as we were going along. And I spent an entire weekend crafting that scene. I mean, it's been, Seth touched it eventually, but because I felt like it was important story for us to know about his depth as an artist. So the other responsibility was, I was kind of responsible for letting his musical secret out in King of Kong. Most people in the video game world didn't even know about it until that movie came out. And so, yeah, there was a double whammy of responsibility here for sure.
And if I may, I know I've got a lot of your time, but I got to get a couple of King of Kong related questions here. And Walter, you even started this, the father of esports. Could you even imagine in your wildest dreams when you did that photo shoot back in the day that not just video games, competitive video games specifically are $1 billion global industry. Can you just give me some of your insights into just how crazy the world of esports has gotten?
I'm trying to. I'm challenged to simplify it into an answer that doesn't take up a half an hour. But essentially, I was fascinated by excellence in action, and that's because I was part of the different studies that they did on people who did transcendental meditation, because they found out that the deep rest and also the brainwave things that happen from TM would increase the person's excellence in action, be able to do things better, easier, uh, you know, and so essentially, I was looking at video game players in the same way, thinking, what is it that makes the champions the champions? So I started monitoring high scores as I traveled around the country as a traveling salesman, and and I fell in love with video game arcades. And I decided I wanted to do an arcade. And when I did the arcade, I immediately started a scoreboard and tried to monitor who was the best in all the games. Next thing I know, I discovered that the video game industry had no scorekeeper and had no scoreboard. So I volunteered to do it, and the video game industry went for it. So suddenly, overnight, my arcade, Twin Galaxies in Ottumwa, Iowa, became the world's most famous arcade. It became the mecca of video game playing. It became the crossroads. It became the Dodge City of video games. And people travel even from other countries, even just to say they once played at the great Twin Galaxies. So suddenly, we were the center of the video game universe, and everything we did was completely original, pioneering, and now historically looking back on it, it is the birth of organized competitive video gaming, which makes it the birth of competitive esports.
And it's just so impressive to see because I mean I remember I watched the King of Kong back when it was on G4. I don't know how long that was after the initial release of it, and I just saw how immediately it took over things. And Ed, I mean, is there anything about like did these things just kind of pop up into your life, or did you know about? How did you hear about competitive Donkey Kong, or how do you kind of get these ideas for your projects?
Stumbling around and just like listening to cool stories, doing some research. But this one came personally in that Steve Wiebe, who is in the King of Kong, it was at the University of Washington at the same time I was. I didn't know him, but one of our mutual friends, a guy named Mike Thompson, who's in the King of Kong, and he's a real great screenwriter, and had been in a band with Steve Wiebe when they were in high school at Newport High School. And so I was up in Seattle visiting, probably 2005. We'd just done a film called New York Doll, which was about Arthur Killer Kane, the bass player for the New York Dolls. And actually, this film, Walter's film, Arcades and Left Signs, is much more like New York Doll for me than King of Kong is. But we were, I think, in post production on New York Doll, and I met Steve Wiebe, and he said, I've got the world record in Donkey Kong. And I just thought that's, sort of fascinating. So we started filming. and we filmed with Steve Wiebe, and then we knew Walter was the guy. We went to Walter, and that's when we filmed that stuff at the barn. And then we sort of knew we had a movie when we met Billy Mitchell, and we flew down to South Florida to meet with Billy. And Billy's in this film, and really you get to see a different side of Billy and his support of Walter through the years. But we sort of just stumbled into it. It was a friend of a friend, and here was this world in 2005, which was 20 plus years after the arcades had pretty much shuttered, and they're still going for records on these great games. And we found this really vibrant group of people still playing, and we filmed for I think a year and still didn't know that Donkey Kong was going to be the focus, but it became clear that was the story, the A story to follow. And it was just, I had just finished New York Doll, was kind of looking for the next thing, and had a Seattle connection, which I liked. And then when we met Walter and Billy, it was like, all right, here's three people that if the story comes together, and we didn't know it would like it did, we could have a movie here.
And I have a million other questions I could ask, but you both have been so generous with your time. So we'll get ready to wrap up here. But before I let you guys go, I kind of want to take off my professional hat here real quick, and I just kind of want to tell you guys how important the King of Kong is to me. Ed, I gave you some brief insight into this, but I got my Fun Spot cup here from all my years ago going in there. I got my copy here of King of Kong on physical here. I actually, after I went and I competed at Fun Spot in multiple tournaments that you guys did, and actually on the back here of my shirt, you probably can't see it too well because it's very small. Walter's actually on the back of my shirt here that I got from the pinball and arcade show. So I really just want to say thank you to both of you for not only doing what you guys do, putting out this movie, but changing the landscape of video games. I run a small niche video game community, and it all directly goes back to the King of Kong, being inspired by what you guys did, the stories you guys told, and just how cool video games are. It just cemented how much greatness there is with video games and how much cool stuff we can do to see not only all the cool stuff that happens from the King of Kong, but to see video games grow and have that directly back to you, Walter, and through your work, Ed. I really just wanted to say thank you to you both for creating easily one of the most important pieces of media of my life. I even had my bachelor party at Fun Spot 2 years ago before I got married. I got a whole bunch of my friends out there, so it's been a very important film to me and a lot of people I know.
Wow, that's a great revelation. I'm so honored to have played a role in your life. So thank you, Paul.
Of course.
Yeah, Paul, I have to say thank you. And it's been cool for me because when you release a film, it's not often you have A, this reaction, or B, that you get to come full circle and meet people like you. We've met, we've been showing the film in theaters, arcades, and love songs, and people just love it. And they come out so moved. And it's funny, the King of Kong fans, we had to make this movie for both non-King of Kong people who just had never seen it, and also the diehards like yourself who've seen it multiple times. And so it's nice because I think we really threaded that needle. And when people come out like you, like in our Hollywood screening, this guy in his early 20s, he bust in from like an hour away. We did a double feature of King of Kong and arcades and love songs. And I'm not kidding. When he met Walter and Billy, it was like he was meeting Led Zeppelin. I mean, he was like nervous. And he said, I watch King of Kong at least once a year for inspiration. And so it's been so cool. You rarely get a chance when you make stuff to get in contact with people. So thank you. It means a lot. And, that it was a positive thing. And that's what this movie is. This movie it's a really positive, go for it story, just like King of Kong was.
I think it's Arcades and Love Songs is a movie you show anybody that's in a rut in their life, and I think it will help pull them out of that because, Walter, I'm going through a big project that I've pushed off and tried to do this, and I'm trying to, I watched it last night and I said, if Walter can go up and take those singing lessons and get himself up in front of the crowd, I can get my butt moving and get myself going with the stuff. Both of you, thank you so much for your time.